that's right, folks. You signed up. You signed up for this. You clicked on this show. So if you're not happy, it's your fault. This is 87 Live on 87 Sports Fans Radio. Keith Grieve, one of your illustrious hosts.
And I'm Steve Taylor.
Hello.
Hi, man.
And without further ado, Jim Saranteas joins us as we hit the intro. Hello, Jim.
Steve, how's it going?
Well, welcome
Jim, what's going on, sir?
Steve, you're there too. This is great. It's like getting the band back together.
This is gotta get the band back together. We might have a little problem with John and George because they're dead, but we've got to get the band back together. Reminder that this and every broadcast is brought to you by...
accent I've ever heard.
I'm not an actor. This and every broadcast is brought to you by CG Imaging. That's cg-imaging.com. CG Imaging, virtually creating reality. This is the 87 Live, 87sportsfans.com NFL recap and Super Bowl preview, folks. If you are a football fan, you will love this show because not only are we going to talk about the things that we got right, we are going to talk about the things we got dead wrong last year. If you listen to our NFL preview show, which was a phenomenal 3 hours of internet talk radio back in August, we all made predictions. We predicted the record of every team. Also picked our AFC and NFC champions and Super Bowl champions. And when we put a little wager down. And here's how it's going to work, kids. We predicted the records for every game that we were off. We will get a point. Whether we overshot, whether we undershot, you get a point for every game that you were off. And then at the end of the day, it's like golf. The team with the lowest, the person with the lowest score wins. And what does one win in this vaunted, challenge, this contest? You win the 87sportsfans.com Beer Stein of Knowledge. Only given out one other time, and that is to Steve's brother for winning our March Madness bracket. And
that just proves that we don't know who has the knowledge and who doesn't, because he pretty much picked the people out of a hat.
Yeah. Well, that just goes to show that whole Warren Buffett thing is really up for grabs.
Yeah, seriously. I'm playing this year.
Yeah, everyone should fill out at least one bracket and just give it a shot, just because you really never know. Yeah, you have to get a perfect bracket. I get it. It's not just winning, but it is what it is. So, gentlemen, recapping our predictions was a very, very interesting NFL season. Before we get into it, any broad generalizations you guys want to make about this past NFL season?
It was an interesting season. I mean, it was a very exciting season. There were a lot of ups and downs. I mean, there was a good portion of the second half where you really weren't 100% sure of who was going to be in the Super Bowl, because even though Denver and Seattle were obviously the best teams in the league, they were showing little signs of weakness. And so there was a little bit of a time where they made it interesting. Of course, the two best teams in the league are in the Super Bowl, which I love. Good for them. And it's different teams. It's not the Patriots. It's not like San Francisco, Baltimore. It's not some of these teams that we've seen recently. And to me, I think one of the big topics of this season has to be injuries. Two major players. To me personally, I did pick Green Bay to go to the Super Bowl. I probably wouldn't have done that if I thought Aaron Rodgers was going to be out for 7 games. So it just seems to me like there were a lot of injuries to major names this year. I know every year there's a lot of injuries, but it just seems like this year there were a lot of big name people that missed either a lot of time or the majority of the season. So that was my biggest surprise.
There was way too many surprises for me to probably talk about the show. Steve hit a bunch on the head. The big thing that both the Broncos and the Seahawks, at some point, you realize that they weren't unbeatable, that they could be their own worst enemy, that other teams could outplay them, take advantage of their mistakes. And while a team, they had the momentum to make the playoffs, whether or not they were going to be the top seeds or not, that was certainly up in the air, at least for a bit of time. The things that surprised me, I think, was the proliferation of the passing game, how you saw so many quarterbacks sort of at the top of the league. Obviously, there's the few that were elite, but then there were a bunch of players that were right there, that in any given week they looked like they were the next Drew or the next Peyton Manning or the next Aaron Rodgers, and that would change from time to time. I mean, nothing was as we thought it would be in the season, and there were a lot of surprises. I mean, people thought the Baltimore Ravens would struggle, but third place, 8-8, wow, it'd be a bit of a shock. How about the Houston Texans? Their fall from grace was absolutely ugly. And then the Kansas City Chiefs, I think we all expected them to be better, but 11-5, that was certainly a shock, just as it was the Eagles 10-6, and Nick Foles being the next elite quarterback. That I thought was absolutely amazing. To see the Packers lose Aaron Rodgers, and really to see how disruptive that was to their team, and how this team that everybody looked up to thought that the next man up could easily take his place. That just wasn't the case. Then you had the Panthers. I thought that their 12-4 season was an absolute shocker. I thought the fact that the Falcons fell to 4-12, that was an absolute shocker. And how about that NFC West? It is now the toughest division in the league.
Yeah, it's amazing when you look at between that and really, aside from Oakland, the AFC West is nothing to jump and shout about. And if Jacksonville can get off the schneid and get their act together, the AFC South could be very competitive as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you, after watching the Jaguars staff at the Senior Bowl, I think that this is a team that, they still have some work to do, but there's some young players out there that can help them.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like they were taking the right steps at the end of the season. I mean, they definitely ended the season on a high note. I think more than a lot of teams in the league. To start as bad as they did and to finish the way they did. I mean, that's you can't help but be optimistic for next year.
And if you want to really look at the Jaguars and say, look, they brought in a head coach who was a defensive coordinator for one of the best defenses in the league the year before. By the end of the season, their defense improved tremendously. If that was their goal this season, was to just get their defense back in line, I think they succeeded. They can certainly do better for next year. And if next year it's all about the offense, I'm telling you, there's some really good players out there that they can either pick up in free agency or draft and make improvements.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. All right, so let's start with the AFC East. The final results, obviously, the New England Patriots won that 12-4. Then the Dolphins and Jets at 8-8 and Buffalo 6-10. When we predicted that, I had big dreams for the Miami Dolphins. I predicted them to win 10 games and win the division. The Patriots to win only 9. Buffalo winning 8, and the Jets, I really did. I thought they were dead in the water. Lame duck year. Rex Ryan would be gone. I was obviously wrong about that. The person that had the best score for this division was Jim. You were only 6 games off for the entire division.
Wow, that's impressive.
You picked the Bills dead on. You picked them to win 6 games. The Dolphins you had at 9 games, and the Patriots you had at 10 games. And the Jets, we all were kind of down on the Jets. We all picked them. Steve and I picked them at 4-12, and Jim picked them at 3-13. Steve-O had the Bills dead in the water, only winning 3 games. And what else? You were 1 game off on the Patriots, and again, like I said, the Jets. So we all pretty much whiffed on the Jets. But
you have to say a lot about what Rex Ryan was able to do this year, because really some of the wins they had, they should not have won those games. I mean, he was able to get some average players to play really well, not all the time, but enough to finish at 8-8, which is very respectable.
Right.
Especially with a rookie quarterback.
Oh, I think that they got more out of Geno Smith than even they were anticipating.
Yeah, if he was just a little more consistent, that could have easily have been a 9-7 or even a 10-6 record.
Yeah, well, he was by no means a world beater, but I think he played better than even they were hoping for.
Yeah, and this is a team that until today I didn't realize sort of many of the changes they've had on the defensive side of the ball, and have still sort of been able to collect themselves and play fiercely on defense. And it's just their offense. If they could just fix that. I mean, I think they're close. They're a quarterback and one really good wide receiver away from it. I think they're doing okay with their running backs, even though if they could add a compliment to Chris Ivory, I think that would be a plus. But they're really, really, really close.
This team was 5-4 going into their bye, and then they traveled to Buffalo and lost to Buffalo, and then they traveled to Baltimore and lost to Baltimore, and then they came home and lost just a stinker to the Dolphins 23-3. You know, if one or maybe two of those games can go their way, if they could figure that out, we may have been talking about the Jets making the playoffs.
Mm.
No.
Playoffs.
They went into New England week 2, and again, the first quarter of the season, a lot of times the teams, especially a team like the Patriots this year, who really took a couple weeks to find their feet. They lost to the Patriots only 13-10. You know, with a quarterback starting only his second career game. So,
I'll tell you another team. Today, I had the pleasure of spending a couple hours with defensive tackle for the Bills, Corbin Bryant, and we spent quite a bit of time talking about the Bills, and just sort of being able to talk to a player on the team. I think they're a team that's very close to a big turnaround, and they have the personnel on the defensive side of the ball. And obviously they've got a new defensive staff. That'll be interesting to see how they work everything out. But they at least have the personnel. On the offensive side, you figure, throw in another one or two good linemen in there, get your young receivers going. E.J. Manuel is on the cusp, I think, of, stop managing him. Let him throw the ball. Let him play. He's ready to go. This is another team that could really make a dent. I mean, this division could go from sort of this division, it's okay. Yeah, they have, some defense. Yeah, it's the Patriots, to another division that's up for grabs, just like the NFC West.
Agreed.
I concur.
I think we got to talk about the Dolphins a little bit here.
We do.
They, like I said, I know that I kind of made everybody furl their eyebrow at me when I picked them to win 10 games in the division, but even with all the turmoil that they went through with that whole Jonathan Martin mess, which seems to be rearing its ugly head again since he decided to give an interview to Tony Dungy that's now getting massive airplay, and it's having such stark revelations like people in the locker room used crude language towards him. Things that you just wouldn't believe. That's total sarcasm, by the way. But anyway, even with all of that, this team was still battling. And down the stretch, you look at weeks 13, 14, and 15. They go to the Jets. They win there. They go to the Steelers, who at that time the Steelers were starting to come back and play much better ball. And then they go and they defend home ground against the Patriots 24-20. Now, it says more to them about with them battling for a playoff spot than they travel to Buffalo, to a division rival, and get shut out by the Buffalo Bills, 19-0. So some growing pains for sure. And then Mike Sherman becomes a sacrificial lamb for Ryan Tannehill's. I think Tannehill's actually coming along all right. My personal opinion. He finished with an 81.7 quarterback rating, a 45.7 QBR, which is not lighting the world up by any stretch of the imagination, but he did have 4 fourth-quarter comebacks and 3 game-winning drives. So there's signs of life. The guy's only 25, remember?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if he can knock down, he had 26 turnovers this year. It was 17 interceptions, 9 fumbles. If he cuts that number in half, this is a much different team. It's just a lot has to be said about that many turnovers. It's tough to win when you're always playing uphill.
Well, the offense really struggled to find an identity because you had Lamar Miller and Daniel Thomas, and it seemed like week to week you didn't know if either of them, much less both of them, were going to show up. And sometimes neither of them showed up, whether it was game planning or the way the game was called, or whether it's just pure lack of execution. And also, Mike Wallace was MIA for much of the first part of the season. He still finished with 73 catches, didn't break the 1,000-yard mark. But they seem to be a team that didn't know what the hell it really wanted to be. on offense.
Well, I mean, they had all types of problems with their offensive line because of their internal troubles. So, I mean, you kind of have to look at it and say, look, they need to improve their offensive line, period. The next thing they need to do, they need a running game. You are not going to win football in the NFL when your pass game struggles without a running game. Mm-hmm. And at times it did struggle. Mike Wallace struggled. I can't put it all on Mike Wallace because it seemed if they weren't getting him the ball enough, he wasn't producing it. That just makes sense. Right. And if you want him to be a playmaker, throw him the damn ball, as Keyshawn Johnson would say. And, so their defense is good. I mean, it was fantastic. And Ryan Tannehill showed he could be an elite quarterback. He had several 300-plus yard games. So it's really about getting that running back. They need one. And there's several that are going to be available in free agency. Let's see if they land one of them.
I don't know if I'm ready to say that they don't already have them, that cool running back on the roster. I think they got to figure out how to get the most out of them. If you look at Lamar Miller and Ryan Tannehill, let me find the stats right now. Lamar Miller averaged 4 yards per carry. Daniel Thomas, I'm not so big on personally, but but he was only averaging 11 rushing attempts a game. There's got to be some kind of commitment to at least a balanced attack. If you don't want to be a run-heavy attack, you at least got to try to find some kind of balance. 11 rushing attempts a game is not going to do it.
Well, and I agree with you, but assume for a minute that the Dolphins do commit to some sort of a running game, because I do agree with that observation. When they were giving Lamar Miller, generally speaking, 15-plus rushing attempts, he was actually producing. But I think what they're looking for is getting somebody to produce earlier than that. And I think that's sort of the reality of the modern NFL that is sort of you can have a team that's rushing for over 100 yards a game, but whether or not you're going to have a majority of that going to one running back has now become the issue. Mm-hmm. And he's just got to be a guy that needs to produce a lot quicker than getting to 15 attempts. If we want him to individually do well, yeah, but it's just not what's going to cut it right now, unfortunately. But I think an offensive line would help. I mean, you can't help but look at the Dolphins and say their internal problems cause problems for that offensive line.
Against the Buccaneers on November 11th, the Monday night game, the Miami Dolphins ran the ball 14 times for 2 yards. I can't make an excuse for that. I don't care.
But if you look at a lot of their losses, and including that game, they're down almost double digits at halftime, and they're having to pass to get back into the game. So if you're losing by, it was 15-7 in that game. If you panic and say, hey, we need to get back in this and we need to start throwing, any team is going to have issues with their running game if they have to try to pass to get back into games. And if you look at most of their losses, they're down by a decent amount at halftime, and they do make decent comebacks in the second half, but it's done through the passing game.
And Daniel Thomas tackled in the end zone in the second quarter of that Buccaneers game. It was just fantastic. Yeah. I don't know. The team's an enigma. I personally don't think Mike Sherman should have been fired. I think if you're going to make any coaching change, you might as well just take Joe Philbin out with you. He's an offensive-minded head coach. He's just as culpable as Mike Sherman could have been. But that's just my own personal wish for proper management.
But I give Philbin, it was his first season.
No, it was his second.
It was his second? I thought it was his first.
That's his second.
Second.
Personally, I don't think you fire a coach before 3 years anyway, but that's just me. Don't tell that to Cleveland. And speaking of Cleveland, nice segue into the AFC North. This division, Steve-O, you won this division. You were off by only 3 games.
Yeah.
The entire division. You picked Pittsburgh 8-8 accurately. You had Cleveland winning 2 games. They won 4. You picked Baltimore 8-8. And you picked the Cincinnati Bengals to win 10 games. Yep. Jim had the Bengals at 9. You had 10 wins for Baltimore, 6 for Cleveland, and 9 for Pittsburgh. I was not high on Pittsburgh at all. I picked them for 6 wins. Cleveland to win 8, which I still think that if Brian Hoyer did not get injured. That may have still come to fruition. Baltimore I picked for 9 wins, and Cincinnati I had as an 8-8 team. The Steelers were really a tale of two halves. I mean, they were a much better team in the second half. Probably the understatement of the year right there. But losing the way that the Ravens seemed to go in and out of fits of offensive struggles kind of shocked me a little bit. I don't know about any of you guys.
See, it didn't really shock me because if you look at it, they lost their number one weapon in Anquan Boldin. Because if you look at their playoff run to the Super Bowl last season, all that money that went to Jesus, I'm drawing a blank right now. I am tired. Flacco. A lot of the success they had in the postseason was Boldin making ridiculous fingertip grabs on poorly thrown balls that really helped propel them into the title or into the Super Bowl. So for me, I wasn't really surprised because I thought that Flacco was overrated. I did not think he deserved the kind of money he got. I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback, but that kind of money he received is Brady Manning, Aaron Rodgers type money. You know, that's not Flacco is not in that category to me. He's just not. He's got a very strong arm, but he just doesn't have that it factor that those top echelon quarterbacks have. So to throw that kind of money at him was just insanity. And of course, when you put that kind of money on somebody, you got to base the offense around them. And you can kind of see that's what they did just by the fact that they got so away from the running game. And I know we had said this for a lot of these games this season. Ray Rice is a great running back, and he is a very solid player. And there were games that they would run him less than 10 times. You know, unfortunately, you know, by the time it got to the end of the season, he wasn't in a groove at all. And no matter how many times they gave him the ball, he just could not do it. So to me, it's like they didn't have an offensive identity. They didn't know if they were a running game. They didn't know if they were, you know, a $20 million quarterback game. They didn't know what they were. And their offense, you know, they didn't have that defense to rely on like they had in past seasons. Their defense was still good, but it was nowhere near what it was last year. Of course, it's not going to be when you lose a Hall of Famer like Ray Lewis to retirement. It's just not going to end. Ed Reed as well. It's just not going to be that way. So to me, there was no offensive identity at all this entire season.
You know, I never had a problem with Flacco getting the money that he got, especially, I mean, it was coming off a Super Bowl win where he had a tremendous playoff run. I mean, for the first time, I think the Ravens allowed Joe Flacco to be Joe Flacco. But then this season rolls around. He's missing Anquan Boldin. I always thought that was a terrible move on the part of the Ravens. But they made the conscious decision that we're going to move on from that veteran. We're going to go with our younger guys. We're going to get them in there to get experience. And, you know, there was, on paper, they have a very talented receiving group. But in the games, I mean, Joe Flacco was under duress. He couldn't get the ball to these guys. I mean, he was throwing the ball a ton. It wasn't going for big plays. And, you know, Ray Rice, I hate to say it, I think he was banged up most of the season. Mm-hmm. He had a few games that were good. Like his Bears game was pretty good. I knew somebody who actually went to the game, and they said they couldn't see what was wrong with Ray Rice. He looked just as he did last year. He knew how to just, you know, run up the gut, but he wasn't involved in the offense. And it's either the offensive coordinator's fault or he was genuinely hurt, and I think it was probably a blend of the two, which is why Gary Kubiak's the new offensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. And what we should see is the Ravens getting back to the running game and getting back to the passing game. I mean, this is a better team than we saw. And defensively, I have no explanation because on paper, this is one of the most talented defenses in the league, and they played far from it.
See, I think it's the leadership factor with that because you lost two of the biggest leaders on that vocal, emotional. I mean, when you lose that much emotion, if no one is there to pick up that slack, and Suggs was injured for a few games this season, wasn't he? I want to say.
You know, he played all 16 games.
I thought I could have swore there was injury there, but it's just when you lose that much emotion, unless somebody steps up and picks up that mantle. I mean, it was obviously there were some games it just didn't seem like they had any wind, any like fire behind them, which is sad after the year they had last year.
Yeah. If you look at on defense, Darryl Smith was the Mike backer, and he led the linebackers anyway with 57 tackles. The other inside linebacker, Jameel McClain, only had 29 tackles in 10 games. So they did lose something on the defensive side for sure. But getting back to the offense, do you know who the second leading receiver as far as receptions was for the Baltimore Ravens without looking at it?
Dixon?
Ray Rice.
Oh, no kidding.
Ray Rice caught 58 balls. Now, I have no problem with running backs catching balls being highlighted, but you're not getting that ball downfield. And again, 5.5 yards per reception, that speaks to the overall threat your offense presents when I look at a stat like that. Torrey Smith caught 65, then Ray Rice, then Marlon Brown, 49, Jacoby Jones. Getting back to, I think it was you, Steve, that said that the Anquan Bolden trade just really, really hurt them more than they wanted to admit.
Yeah, and I agree with Jim. It made no sense. It really, I mean, I understand they want to move on, but some of these young receivers, give them another season with Bolden kind of just more, even if you have him as a teacher. I mean, you can't transition from a Super Bowl team and then just cut your throat. I mean, Bolden, he's shown with the 49ers that regardless of the fact that he's a veteran, he is still a very productive veteran.
Yeah. No, I
don't get it.
He went to San Francisco and fit right in. Didn't look like he missed a step to me. But
it looked like he the way he played with San Francisco, it looked like he could have gone to almost any team in the league and would have been able to produce the way he did. Because I'm sorry, Jim. What are you saying?
No. Finish your thought.
No, I was just gonna say it's just he's that kind of talent that to steal Jim's thunder from earlier when he said throw him the damn ball. Look, pretty much if you throw the ball in this guy's general direction, he's gonna catch it. Mm-hmm. He's had his drops, but he's that kind of receiver that he can fit into a system and be productive.
I'm a big fan of Anquan Bolden. I loved him when he was at the Cardinals, loved him with the Ravens, love him with the 49ers. My biggest gripe is that teams don't use him enough as much as they should. He's just a big play receiver, and he just doesn't get that respect from the offensive coordinators. I mean, if you needed somebody to get the ball to make a play, he's the guy. And until the playoffs last year, we really didn't see that from Anquan Bolden when he was on the Ravens. Because they didn't get him the ball until last year in the playoffs. And when they did, he just was phenomenal. He was if he wasn't the best receiver in last year's playoffs, he must have been one of the top 5. And this year, when Colin Kaepernick did decide to throw the ball to him, he caught it. And he made plays. And, you can't wait for a second receiver to step up to then say, oh, let's throw it to Anquan Bolden. Just throw him the damn ball. He will catch it. So, he's a free agent. If the 49ers are smart, they'll re-sign him. If not, I think there's a very talented player out there that a team that can use a veteran wide receiver should go get and use him.
I'd be interested to see what's going to happen because he did talk retirement last season after the Super Bowl before he got picked up by the Niners. So if the Niners, if he does get out there in free agency or if they don't give him what he thinks he deserves, I'd be interested to see what happens. I'm not saying he will retire, but he did kick the idea around pretty seriously last offseason.
All right. I want to talk about the Bengals too, because you win 11 games, you win the AFC North, and then you go on a run of just turning the ball over like there's no tomorrow with the finale against the Ravens, 4 turnovers, and then the playoffs at the San Diego Chargers, 4 more. I don't I'm willing to say Andy Dalton's not the solution at quarterback. I'm not saying that there's a better one out there right now, but you're not going to win with Andy Dalton. What does anybody else think?
I don't know. I think Andy Dalton has issues with turnovers. I mean, that's pretty obvious, but I mean, he's a talented guy. He just needs to learn how to take care of the ball. I mean, the reason that they are not, didn't go farther in the postseason or even playing in the Super Bowl is the fact that some of his interceptions were just head scratching. I mean, he had no receiver within the area. He was just kind of throwing it up for grabs. And the guy's talented. I mean, you saw it in a lot of the games that they did win earlier in the season. And in the first half of the season, he looked like an MVP candidate. He was playing great. And then he just kind of hit a wall and started turning the ball over and having like sub 100-yard passing games. And it just, I know the defense has improved and people figured out how to defend him. But for a guy that has some serious raw talent, it was kind of a head scratcher what happened with him. I'm not going to write him off quite yet. I'll give him this whole next season, but I think this is definitely going to be his, the most important season of his career potentially coming up now.
I tend to agree. I think that the Bengals will put up with more than we would like to admit to. The reality is he's a young quarterback. He just finished up his third season. He certainly has shown signs of being an elite quarterback. He can throw the 300-plus yard game. He can throw the 3-plus TD game. He just needs to be more consistent because you can't turn around and do those sorts of things and then the following week throw 150 yards, 1 TD, and 3 interceptions. Right. I mean, nobody should stand for that. But the Bengals are the kind of team that, look, we're going to adjust to our weaknesses and strengths and find a way with our group of people to win, and that's just the way they go about their business. So I don't see Andy Dalton going anywhere anytime soon. I think he'd have to be around for 5, 6, 7 years before they give up on him. And I think he's going to be there for a while, and they're going to keep trying to add pieces to make him successful.
Another thing, a success story for the Bengals that I want to touch on is linebacker Vontaze Burfict, Pro Bowl player, and over 110 tackles. I think he had like 114 tackles. But the thing that I want to stress on is as we head into another postseason, off-season, where we're going to start breaking down draft candidates, this guy was projected, according I'm looking at CBSSports.com, he was projected to be a 7th-round draft pick. And I think the Bengals ended up taking him in the 3rd or whatever, and people just kind of furrowed their eyebrows at him. But the opening line of his overview is that perfect rhymes with perfect, but that's only a coincidence. He just played a phenomenal year, and if this is the real Vontaze Burfict, then I feel good for I feel good for the guy, because there was a lot of question marks about whether he had the complete package. He had shown flashes of the ability to play, but hopefully, this is the type of linebacker that the Bengals can hope to count on for years to come, because he was just phenomenal this year.
No, I agree. And so was their entire defense. They were one of the best in the league. I mean, they were 5th in passing, 5th in rushing. I mean, they were as solid a defense. And, I mean, if you look at it, you got to wonder how many of the losses they sustained and points given up by them were just because of the fact that they would get off the field, Dalton would go in, throw a pick 2 plays later, and they would be back on the field. And, if you look at the time of possession in some of these games, that defense was on the field for quite a while, and to finish as well as they did still is impressive to me.
Mm-hmm. They got all the pieces. They just got to be able to hold on to the ball. I don't know if Dalton's the guy.
Well, they need to win that first game in the playoffs. I mean, they've lost in the first round, 2 years in a row?
Yeah.
2, 3. Otherwise, I think they've got a great team.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, on offense, they definitely need to work on a second receiver. AJ Green can't be the only player that you throw the football to. And at times you saw flashes of the second and third wideouts stepping up. But, I'm not sure that Andy Dalton necessarily went back to those guys when he should have. As well as, I think, boy, they've got a great tight end there in, what's his name? Tyler Eifert. I mean, what are they waiting for? He should have been involved in this offense heavily.
He caught 39 balls. Gresham caught 46 balls. So, they have the potential to do something similar to what New England did with Gronkowski and Hernandez, with the type of games that those two bring to the table. But again, here's another offense that their second leading receiver was a running back, Giovanni Bernard.
Yeah.
Well, there's a guy that I'm looking forward to seeing how his career goes.
Are they done with Ben Jarvis Green Ellis, you think?
No, I think he's still got a year in his contract, I believe. I don't see them moving on. I think they kind of like having a veteran like him around. But I also think that we should see Gio Bernard start carrying more of the load. I mean, in my mind, he's the better running back.
Alrighty. 2 divisions down, and we're already 36 minutes in, so we're going to have to pick up.
Yeah, we need to move this along.
Let's hit the AFC South, and then we'll take a break and catch our breath here. Okay, so the AFC South, this one was a tie, won by myself and Jim, but it was not pretty. We were 11 games off for the entire division.
Well, Houston screwed all of us.
Yeah. Houston was the team that we combined were 26 games off on. That was our worst team. Steve and I picked them to go 11-5. Jim picked them to go 10-6, and they finished 2-14. Just no way anyone could see that coming. However, I will share one little soundbite. This is from our NFL preview show back in August. This is still the Texans division. There's just too much. I know Matt Schaub's got his weaknesses. He's very quickly being exposed as maybe not, quite as elite as everyone thought that he could be, but he's still throwing to Andre Johnson. He's still got Arian Foster. And until that they prove to me, even with Ben Tate as a backup, even if Foster's back injury creates more of an issue, until they show me that hinders their ability to run the ball, it's still Houston's division. Guess what? They showed me that it's going to hinder their ability. Because they just fell right off the planet, and obviously the whole coaching staff was sacked, and now there's talk about the future of Matt Schaub. But does it even belong in Houston anymore? So, did anybody have any other comments on that dissent?
Well, no, I agree, and it was sad because they do have a solid defense and they do have the weapons on offense, but this is a Houston team that. I would not be surprised if they have a Kansas City type turnaround next season because they do have the talent on their team. They have the number 1 pick, that's not scoffing at. Either they're going to get someone with the number 1 pick, be it Johnny Manziel or Teddy Bridgewater, or they're going to trade it to get maybe a Clowney and someone else. They're gonna be smart about this, and with the talent they have. I think that Houston is going to make a huge turnaround next year. But Schaub, I agree. I think he's done. He's no longer going to be with that team.
The Texans, like the Falcons, like the Dolphins, and I'm trying to think of a few more teams. I want to throw the Lions into that group, but I can't. They're fine examples of teams that before the season started unloaded one of their very good offensive linemen. By just cutting them outright. And they're a great example. They're great examples of teams that need to understand you need to have good offensive linemen to be successful in the NFL. Otherwise, you need a very good quarterback who can get the ball out of his hands within seconds. And there aren't that many quarterbacks that can do that. The Texans suffered. Their quarterback suffered. Arian Foster suffered. I have on thefantasygreek.com, it's one of my top 10 comeback players for next season. I was looking at his numbers, and I think when they finally put him on IR, which I want to say was 8 weeks into the season, he only scored 1 or 2 TDs. This is a guy who put up, 14, 17 the year before? I mean, you don't fall from grace like that just because of the injuries, the ailments that he had. I think there's more going on. And, I was a little shocked that they didn't make more wholesale changes on the defensive side of the ball in terms of the coaching staff, because that's a defense that all of us, I think, have agreed in the past. The personnel is exactly the same from the top 5 defense in 2012. How can you not have the same top 5 defense in 2013? It's a head scratcher.
Yeah, and you have arguably the best defensive lineman in all of football on your team in J.J. Watt, who had another great season, but I felt bad for the guy because there were some games he just looked like he was running by himself.
All for naught.
What's his name again, Steve?
J.J. Watt!
It was more like this year. It was more like J.J. What? Sorry. Couldn't resist that. I think, well, ironically, this division had the team that we were the most wrong about, but it also had the team we were the most right about, Jacksonville. Jim and I both picked them 4-12. Steve thought they were going to be slightly worse at 3-13. So a grand total of 1 game off for the Jaguars. But I think the real surprise in this division, and surprise in what happened in the offseason as soon as the season was over, is the Tennessee Titans. They finished 7-9. Before Jake Locker got injured, they were showing signs of like they wanted to turn the corner. A team that was ready to take that next step, not to contend for a Super Bowl, not to contend for even a conference championship, but they were playing good offensive football, and they had a defense that punched you in the face. And that'll take you a long way. I thought they had the right head coach in Mike Munchak, and now that's all out the window. Rumor has it ownership wanted Munchak to change his staff. Munchak took the loyalty route, and so they all got trotted out of town. And in comes Ken Wisenhunt, who claims to not know much about Jake Locker, which would scare me as much as anybody if I was a fan. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on the Titans, Jim?
Well, I think, Keith, your observations are right on the money. This was a team that prior to Locker was prepared in the corner. Hats off to Jake Locker for what he did in the limited games that he did play in. Hats on, because he couldn't stay healthy. And it wasn't a situation of problems with the offensive line. Certainly the injury that he had during the Jets game, it was kind of a freak injury. I mean, it didn't even look like he got hurt from any contact. But he's the kind of quarterback that was putting himself in positions to get hurt. And that's not what kind of quarterback you want in the NFL. I mean, if you're going to scramble and do something, just don't let anybody make any contact with you. And he just wasn't doing that. So I agree that I thought the changes to the staff was sort of, I don't know, it was wasn't right. They had a good coaching staff that was able to get this team refocused, redirected, doing the right things. They probably needed a quarterback. They needed to get rid of Kenny Britt and just go with their young receivers because they're all very good. Chris Johnson, I heard somewhere that he's looking to make more money or not take a pay cut, and I think he got to get real. I don't know how many teams out there are going to look to pick him up if he is made a free agent, but I think the kind of money that he made right after his breakout season, that's not going to happen again. So they might even need to move on from him. And Sean Green looks like he could be a good running back for them.
Mm.
So
no, I agree with you, Jim.
I wouldn't count them out for next season, but these changes with the coaching staff, makes no sense to me.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you. I think one of their biggest problems was the fact that they really didn't have a running game this year. I mean, for a team with a young quarterback, it's been proven in this league, you need to have a running attack. If you have a veteran quarterback who knows how to deal with adversity in a pass rush, it's a kind of a different story. But when you have a young quarterback, you need to have some kind of a rushing attack, and they really did not this year.
I'm not going to put this on Chris Johnson, though.
No, I'm not putting it on him. I'm putting it on the entire rushing attack, like all of the running backs. And Chris Johnson has said that he felt the coaching staff didn't use him properly, which may be the case. I mean,
I don't know. They did a good job making him sort of one of the things that he did differently to start the season was be more of a between the tackles running back. But I would agree with him that they should have used him out on the edges, in space, and that's not his problem. That's a problem with the offensive line. Those kinds of things you should be able to set up almost at will.
And let's not forget, it was reported 2 days ago by Jason Lockenfora that he had a torn meniscus suffered in week 3.
I heard about that. I don't know much about that, but that's.
He had surgery. And it's a 4 to 6 week recovery.
Yeah.
But when he's supposedly, they're also saying they're gonna ask him to take a pay cut, and he's going to refuse it because if you remember, he decided to hold out a few years back for a big payday and decided and immediately turned to crap. But
I agree with Jim. No team is going to give him the kind of money he's looking for. I really doubt it, especially because the fact, you also look at the fact that he's not getting any younger. I mean, he's not old, but for running backs, he's getting there. Mm-hmm. So I don't think he's going to get nearly the money he's looking for.
It shall be interesting. Oh, yes, it shall. Then you have the Indianapolis Colts. Andrew Luck seemed to take a step with that first-round playoff win. A little come-from-behind action after he looked a little rattled early on. When you're looking at whether your team, your quarterback has the right guy, to me that's got to encourage you. Not that there was ever any doubts about Andrew Luck, but a second-year quarterback making those kind of what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say a growth spurt, but taking those kind of steps. I don't even want to call it a leap because it's not even really a leap. It's just kind of, filling out that when you're making a mental checklist of what you want your franchise quarterback to have, you want to have that makeup where if you're trailing in the fourth quarter of a playoff game and he hasn't had the best game historically or through the first half anyway, that they have the ability to be resilient. Resiliency is the word I'm looking for. So, if you're a Colts fan, I mean, I had this conversation with somebody who didn't really know that much about, doesn't follow football very, very closely, and they made a comment about how the Colts must be kicking themselves for letting Peyton Manning go, and I'm like, they're not kicking anything at all. They absolutely did the right thing. They handled it the right way, but it's going to be a lot of fun watching Andrew Luck, I guess is my point.
Yeah, and I give him and the coaching staff a lot of credit because counting the Denver game, they went 7-3 without Reggie Wayne. So to lose your pretty much your number one player on that team, as far as being a playmaker, being a vocal leader, being a leader on the field, to lose him and have that success, it is a testament to that team and to win that first game in the postseason.
It'll be interesting to see what they do this offseason because to some degree, I mean, they were a fantastic team because they were beating some very good teams. They were winning in ways that no one really expected. But they certainly have some needs. First and foremost, they need to find a complementary receiver for T.Y. Hilton. I mean, if Reggie Wayne does return this season, I mean, he's so close to the end. One of my predictions was that Reggie Wayne would not return or would be cut because I think there just comes a point you kind of look around and go, we need to move on. And I didn't see the same Reggie Wayne this season, even when he was healthy, as we had last season, the season before that, or the season before that. So I think this is a good time for them to assess that, as well as they need a running back. Brown's a free agent. I want to say, and I'd have to look this up, whether Vic Ballard and Ahmad Bradshaw are free agents. I think Vic Ballard might be. But all that's left is Trent Richardson. And if he is not going to be your go-to running back, you better find one. Because you don't need to have the blockbuster running back these days, but you do need a guy that can get you 100 all-purpose yards and 1 to 2 scores. Not every game, but every other game. And if Trent Richardson, in my mind, needs to work on his vision and his burst, and I kind of think he needs to lose a little bit of weight.
No, I agree. I mean, even if they find somebody that complements Richardson, somebody that can do the lion's share of the carries and have Richardson just become like a third down back. But I don't know. I think that is still going to go down as the best trade this season when Cleveland dropped him. I mean, we lambasted them for the trade, and now it looks like they knew exactly what they were doing.
Trent Richardson should be in the most ideal position to be successful for a running back. You get traded to a team with a quarterback that defenses have to respect. So they can't stack in the box and say, well, we'll just let Andrew Luck beat us, because more often than not, Andrew Luck will beat you. Mm. And whether it's a digesting the playbook kind of thing, I don't know. Don't want to make any statements that I'm obviously ignorant of because I'm not in the situation. But it seems to me that if Richardson's the real deal, he was put in the position to be successful, and he couldn't unseat Donald Brown.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I'm curious. I'm excited to see Andrew Luck's career, though, because of all the players in this league, he is very much like Peyton Manning, where he made his mistakes in the postseason with those turnovers, but I guarantee you right now he is studying on how to fix it, and he cares that much about winning and being the best that I'm excited to see this guy's career. I think he could definitely be the headliner of the next generation of Hall of Fame quarterbacks if he continues this upswing.
Well, now I want to take a little moment here while we're talking about Andrew Luck, because I want to make a little statement directed at Mr. Luck. Andrew, no one doubts your on-the-field presence, your ability to sling the ball. No one doubts what you can do on the football field. But I'm asking you, with every fiber of my being, don't grow that beard ever again. You look like a Civil War general. Please shave.
Hey, he's supporting the Amish.
Oh my God, he looked like one of those old rustic photographs of Civil War generals that just didn't have a razor because they were running for their lives. But
hey, you make millions, you look the way you want to look.
Yeah, exactly. So let's take a quick break, and then we'll roll into the AFC West, everybody's favorite topic. You're listening to the 87 Live NFL Recap and Super Bowl Preview on 87 Sports Fans Radio. We'll be back in a minute, folks.
Some
You're listening to 87 Live, the NFL recap and Super Bowl preview. This was really Monday Night Football in its heyday when this theme song was on.
You know, though, every time I hear that Monday night opening, it makes me think of the guy from the Righteous Brothers who sang the rip-off for the movie The Last Boy Scout.
Yeah.
I love that. That's one of my favorite movies, man.
Al, Frank, and Dan. Where Al Michaels held together, kept Frank Gifford from passing out in the booth, and managed to mute Dan Deerdorf whenever necessary.
It is kind of sad, though, that Deerdorf called his last game. I enjoyed Deerdorf. He was.
You think so?
Yeah, he grew on me.
I'm glad you're upset about it. I just every time there was a game and there was a fumble and a pile, you could count on Deerdorf to make the comment. I guarantee whoever had that ball at the beginning doesn't have it anymore. I bet you that possession's changed about 4 times.
Yeah, well, you get your head knocked around with some of those teams in the 70s, and you tell me how much you won't keep repeating yourself.
Yeah.
The fact that he was able to speak, I think, was a miracle.
All right, so let's keep moving on. We're going to pick up the pace here, folks, and we'll get with the AFC West. We were all pretty much dead on with the Denver Broncos. Steve picked them to win 14 games. Jim and I at 12. Kansas City, all three of us picked them to win 9 games. They ended up winning 11. None of us expected anything from the Oakland Raiders. Jim and I picked them to win 2 games. Steve picked them to win 1. They ended up winning 4. And the San Diego Chargers, I had them winning 5, Steve 7, Jim 8. So this division is won by Jim. 6 games off for the entire division. And then Steve with 8, and then me with 9. Pretty tight. Just quick thoughts. I mean, Kansas City got on a great run early on, and then it seemed like their pass rush went away in the second half of the season, and teams started to figure them out a little bit. And they kind of limped to the finish line, and then you had that playoff loss that Eagles fans knew was coming because Andy Reid just seems to do that stuff in the playoffs, whether it was his fault or not. And I was really impressed by the Chargers and Phillip Rivers seasons. I don't know if you guys want to talk briefly about any of that.
Well, I mean, just touching on Kansas City, if you look at their first 9 games where they were 9-0 going into their bye week. Now looking at the teams they played in those 9 games, none of them, and I'm taking Philadelphia on the fact that they were still in disarray at this point. None of them really had offenses that were, burn the house down this whole season. It's when they got into that second half and they played against Denver and San Diego and Indy. That's when their defense started to really show the signs of weakness, which, I mean, it's going to when you play against really top-notch offenses. Going on to Phillip Rivers, though, it was really – I've never been a huge Phillip Rivers fan, but I have to say I was happy to see that a little bit of a kind of his career coming back. You seemed like this offense and the coaching staff kind of rejuvenated him. And to me, I think that his season ended prematurely, and I will put all of that on Ken Wisenhut's shoulders because I still think that he did not have this team prepared. But for me, I applaud what Phillip Rivers did, and I hope that this is a continuing trend with him.
I'm quite impressed by the Kansas City Chiefs. It really shows how Andy Reid, it really shows what was missing with the Chiefs, with a really good head coach. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing to see how this team immediately responded to Andy Reid, especially the defense, turning things around. Offensively, Jamal Charles, what a stud. And I think what the thing that the Chiefs need to do is play a little less of, hey, if we can run the ball 10 times this game and win, let's just do that, to let's win the game, but let's also sort of develop a balanced approach to playing the game. Mm-hmm. You can't give the ball to Jamal Charles, 40 times out of 60. Mm-hmm. He's not going to last. Sooner or later, people will find a way to shut him down. you're putting away talented players like Dwayne Bowe. And I think you have to open it up a little bit to prepare for a team like the Broncos. I mean, regardless of what they do this weekend, the reality is this is still should be a good team next year. So looking forward to that. And with the Chargers, it was nice to see the Chargers. I think the coaching staff, I have to give a lot of credit to them. I think this is a talented team, but not as talented as that final record, and getting into the playoffs made them look. I think this coaching staff did a lot with what they had. This was not a good offensive line walking into the season. I think they did a better job than many expected, but I also have to give a lot of credit to Phillip Rivers. They've got some nice young components, and they need to keep building on that. And we'll see whoever takes Ken Whisenhunt's spot, whether he can keep the train rolling.
All right. And so finishing up the AFC, Jim and I both picked Denver to win the AFC. And Steve's pick was the Houston Texans. Wah, 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 wah.
Yeah, I wasn't alone with that wah-wah, though.
That's all right. You were alone on this program.
Who did you take, Steve?
I picked Houston.
Got it. Okay.
Because going into the season, I thought that their offense wasn't as good as Denver's, but their defense was better. And, no one saw what happened to them coming. None of us.
No need to explain. Seriously.
Yeah.
It was brainer.
Yeah. So going on to the NFC now. The NFC East, there was a very interesting comment made by Steve in the preview show that the New York Giants were very underrated. And Steve and Jim both picked them to win 10 games. I picked them to win 8. They ended up winning 7. The Eagles 10-6. None of us saw that coming. I was the more optimistic one at 7 than Jim projecting 6. Steve with 5. Dallas at 8-8. I predicted 10 wins for them. Steve 9, and Jim hit it spot on 8-8. And then the one that really killed us in this division was the Washington Redskins. Steve was the closest at picking them at 6-10. And pretty impressive little comments I remember Steve making about RG3 definitely not being himself again. And sure enough, he was
spot on.
Spot on. Jim was at 9, and I really loved them in the preseason, and I picked them at 11 to win 11 games. Just sunk me. Absolutely sunk me. So this division was won by Steve, but we were all way off. 12 games off for Steve, 13 for Jim, 14 for me. It'd be very interesting to see what Washington does going forward, whether RG3 can bounce back. Because if he has another lackluster season, then you'll start to see some major question marks being asked, in my opinion.
No, I agree. And the Giants, they have a solid team. They just were they made their mistakes. They had their drops. They had their turnovers. Eli had one of the worst seasons of his career. Dallas, once again, the enigma of all enigmas in the NFL. Who knows what they're going to be next year? They have the talent. They have unbelievable talent. But I still don't think Garrett is the answer. And I don't know if they're going to ever win with him and Jerry Jones being the brain trust behind them. And Philly, I am, as always, and everyone knows this, a Nick Foles bandwagoner. And I think that this guy is crazy talented. And with the weapons on that team, I only see them getting better. Another year under this crazy offense, I could see them having maybe 1 or 2 more wins next season.
All right. Jim, anything?
I'll tell you, well, first off, with the Giants, their key to coming back is grouping and getting that offense going again. I mean, I expect Eli Manning to be one of the comeback players of the year, along with Victor Cruz and Hakeem Nicks on a different team.
Mm-hmm.
They've now have, the former quarterbacks coach of the Packers, a guy who's been on that team for 8 years. I think that's a good thing for Eli Manning. I think a change was needed. The defense seemed to come together as the season progressed, and in part, I think it was after they picked up John Beeson. They were probably sorely lacking a leader, and now they have. Let's see what they do. I expect the boy, the Giants need to address their running back situation. I mean, is Andre Brown coming back? He's a free agent. David Wilson having off-season surgery on his neck. Who knows what his situation is going to be? So there's a lot of question marks there. But it is a team definitely poised to bounce back. But I think the Eagles still dominate. I mean, there were a lot of good things. There were a lot of good players on that team left over from the Andy Reid era that the new staff inherited, and they just did some really good things with them. I'd like to see that defense really step it up and shut down. The Cowboys, who knows? I mean, every year you kind of look and go, wow, what a talented team, and yet they always fall short. I'm not blaming Tony Romo. I think he's a good quarterback. I think it's all the other things going on around him. And even when you look at the recent changes they made to the coaching staff, it's all a bunch of head scratchers. None of it makes sense. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're going to put in a new defensive coordinator, put in a new defensive coordinator and get rid of the old guy. That's all you can do. And the Redskins are going to be in a rebuilding mode. So if RG3 can use the season to really learn from his mistakes from his rookie year and get healthy, they could be primed to at least play much better than they did.
Mm. Yeah, I think he needs to go through a Cam Newton type of awakening also. Just from stuff you hear about him in the locker room and whatnot, he needs to come down to earth and realize that this is a team and he is the leader, but this is a full-on team sport, and he needs to just kind of get away from the whole RG3 thing and become a Washington Redskin quarterback.
I didn't hear any of that. Yeah.
Oh, there's all kinds of stuff going on this season, including him telling the coaching staff to take out his negative plays from film, and anytime they did film watching, and there was a lot of little grumbles, and it could have been just him and Shanahan. It absolutely could have just been their relationship, but
even Shanahan denied that story, though. I don't know.
Yeah,
who believes Shanahan? It's just, all I'm saying is there's obviously some kind of discontent. Something's going on where it's, I think he needs to work on a lot of things, and one of them is to be that humble leader, which I don't know if he is yet. Because you look at the ultimate quarterback in this league is Peyton Manning, and he is the most humble leader on any team. He is 100% humble, and that's why I give him all the credit in the world for. He is like always, hey, you threw for 500 yards. Yeah, but this guy did this, and this guy did that, and this guy did that. And I think that's what RG3 needs to look at. He needs to be a little more like that.
This is definitely a growing experience because he was under the crosshairs, and it's one of those situations. I think that winning cures all, and if the same personalities and issues had been on a 13-3 team instead of a 3-13 team, we'd be remarking about how wonderful Shanahan kept the chemistry together with so many individuals. So.
Yeah, but really, and to go with the whole RG3 thing, going back to what I said in the beginning of the season. I think one of the other problems was like Jim said he wasn't healthy, but number two, he realized, and you could see during this season, he does need to change his game a little bit, because if he played the way he did that first season, he's going to be injured every year. Because he, unlike Russell Wilson, never knew when to slide or get out of bounds. He took a lot of hits, and I think he was making those adjustments this season. So I'd be interested to see what's going to happen this year with him healthy and trying to at least be a little bit more of a pocket passer. Because his body type, he's just not like a Colin Kaepernick that can take a full-on hit head-on and get up from it. He needs to really – and so I think he's going to have definitely a better season. I think he's going to improve somewhat.
All right. Moving on to the NFC North, this division, let me tell you something. Jim and me, spot on, 6 games difference for this whole division. The Bears won 8. Jim and I picked 9. Steve was the optimist at 10. Green Bay actually 8-7-1. Steve had a man crush on the Green Bay Packers, 13 wins. Jim and I thought they were going to win the division, which they did, but win 10 games. The one team that all 3 of us were spot on with was the Detroit Lions. All 3 of us picked them for the 7-9 record that they finished with. That's just fantastic. And Minnesota Vikings, disappointing, 5-11. Coach is gone. Jim and I picked them for 8. Steve picked them for 9. So without that Green Bay pick, Steve would have fallen back to the pack. But the big dogs take the day. tooling around the division, Green Bay seemed like I know they were without Aaron Rodgers for a bunch, so you can almost discount this whole season. But defensively, I thought they were hit or miss all year. Detroit was big early, and then they just collapsed. But I think that really speaks more to Jim Schwartz's leadership than anything else. I said it in the preview. I don't like anybody that gets that bent out of shape over something like a handshake. I think that tells you all you need to know about his psyche and what he allows on his team to germinate and permeate everybody. With the Bears, Cutler injured. McCown played fantastic as his backup. You can't even really hold that against the Bears this year because that offense was tailor-made for a quarterback to be successful. And whether it was Cutler, whether it was McCown, they got what they needed out of that position. The shocking part of this division to me, even more than the Vikings only winning 5 games, was that the Bears' defense was so atrocious. Just a sieve. It couldn't stop anybody. They couldn't wrap up a Christmas present, much less anything else. I don't know what anybody else thinks. I don't want to talk too much on this division, but I'll open the floor.
Well, I look at the North, and Chicago did play down a couple games than what I thought, but once again, a lot of that would go into, even though McCown played well, the Cutler injury definitely played a part. But the Green Bay Packers, I think, are the one team in this division that is going to improve greatly over any of the other 3. And if you look at it, it wasn't just Aaron Rodgers. They had serious injuries on offense in wide receiver, tight end. Their defense also was injury prone. That they were decimated but look, going into next season, they get everyone back healthy. They have a healthy Aaron Rodgers. And then my number one man crush this year, Eddie Lacy, him and Starks, I believe, is quickly becoming, depending on how they do this next season. But if you base it off of this year, they are one of the best 1-2 combos in the backfield in any team in the league. So I think Green Bay, if they can stay healthy next year, I think the sky's the limit, because really, if Rodgers didn't go out with the injuries, you're looking at a 10-11 win team. So we wouldn't have been far off from what they ended up at. So to me, I think the other teams are going to, I don't know if Detroit's going to improve per se. They might still be in the 7-9, 8-8 region. Minnesota, I would even look at them maybe even being 5-10 or even a little worse. Chicago, always the optimist. I would hope they can, get up there to a 10-win season, maybe make the postseason. But I think going into next year, this is going to be Green Bay's division to lose.
That's probably the case. It's probably been the case the past 10 years. The 2 teams that really have the most to gain this offseason is first the Lions, who potentially have one of the best rosters in the league, but for an offensive line that needs a bit of improvement and a secondary that is getting decimated because of poor play from their defensive line and linebackers. They could sort of solve those things. This is a team that can be really good. And one more thing, they need a second receiver. You can't just put this all on Calvin Johnson. I mean, that sort of proved it this year that, you just can't. You need to have a second guy. It's not going to be Nate Wilson. They need to move on from him. He's never really impressed me since his days with Seattle. I don't know. They need one of these young, great receivers that I saw at the Senior Bowl on their roster. And, the Bears, I mean, once they get their defense locked down and can stop the rushing attack, this should be a much better Bears team. They also need to be careful not to get stuck with sort of the same old thing on offense. Same old receivers, the same running, the same plays. Outside of that, the Vikings, still huge question marks. They made some great moves in the draft list, but boy, do they need a quarterback. Yeah. They need to solve that. And until they do, will be a team that if they are like the other season where they made the playoff, to everybody's surprise, it'll just be a fluke and a coincidence.
That'd be it's funny because not to talk too much Bears, but with Lovie Smith, you had a defensive coach who couldn't tend to the offense, and now it looks like we have an offensive coach who can't tend to the defense. So, but it's only 1 year, and it's not fair to make any kind of dispersions. But I was a little disappointed that Mel Tucker was not fired. but it is what it is. The NFC. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So who won this?
I'm sorry. Say that again.
Who won this amongst the three of us?
Oh, the division. Jim, you and I.
That's great,
we're both
Keith.
6 games off. Steve,
Nice.
who also is a fan of the Bears, apparently doesn't know the division as well as he thinks. So now let's move on to the division that gave all three of us fits. That was the NFC South. This was our worst division. Total, we were 52 games off for the three of us. 52 games off. And the worst, the team that screwed it up for everybody was the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, Falcons.
Steve picked them for 13 wins. I picked them for 11. Jim for 10. They ended up with 4. And then the other side was the flip side, Carolina. We all picked them for 6 wins. And they go and they win 12 and win the division. New Orleans won 11. I picked them for 10. Steve 11. Jim 9. And Tampa Bay, Steve and Jim both picked them as a 500 team, and I picked them 5 and 11, and they ended up winning 4 and firing their head coach. So, that being said, as far as New Orleans goes, they you think you know what you get when you look at the Saints, and then they go into that Monday night regular season game against Seattle, and they get destroyed outdoors trying to play their game. And then when it counted, especially the first playoff game, all of a sudden they start running the ball. And they seem pretty dominant again. And then they just ran into Seattle in the playoffs, which, there's a reason they're going to the Super Bowl. But the Falcons, injury riddled all year. It really is a shame. I don't know. In Carolina, Cam Newton showed me a ton this year. Because they did not have a stellar running game. They still have not found another receiving threat to Steve Smith, who got another year older. And that defense is just fantastic. I'll open it up to the floor for comments.
I don't really have much to say about any team except for Carolina. I think they have taken over the reins in the South because you look at them, they do have, other than Steve Smith, they have a young team. They have a very good team. That defense is incredible. And Cam Newton, it seems like he's turned that corner to becoming the quarterback that everyone thought he was going to be coming out of the draft. If they can continue what they did this season, I think the South is now officially theirs, and it could be theirs for a few seasons to come. And I'm not taking anything away from New Orleans and Atlanta. Even Tampa, they're going to improve. But it just seems like Carolina has jumped to up a level. So it was fun to watch, and I was happy to see them make it as far as they did.
This division is going to get ridiculous once Tampa Bay gets back to competence. Because Atlanta was an off year. Carolina's good. New Orleans is good. With Tampa Bay, if Mike Glennon really is the answer for the future at quarterback, with Lovie Smith coming over and taking over that defense, and you have Doug Martin at running back, you have some receiving threats. This could be the second coming of what we saw in the NFC West this year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a division that's definitely shaping up to be a division in 2014 that could well be up for grabs. What was absolutely impressive was how much the Saints defense improved. And I agree, Steve. Carolina, the Panthers, that was amazing what happened. But let's not forget about the Saints, who had the worst defense in 2000, the absolute worst. And if they could, one, they need to add to their offensive line. 2, they need a second receiver besides Jimmy Graham. And 3, they need to dedicate themselves to 2 running backs that can have an effective running game. If the Saints can't get back to that, they will not be the same Super Bowl team that we saw a few years ago. Panthers sort of need the same thing, too. Somebody has to step up. Steve Smith is not the answer. And he's getting close to the end of his career. And they're going to need a running back because D'Angelo Williams is also at the end of his career. Jonathan Stewart has been injury-prone and hasn't been effective. Mike Tolbert is a fullback, not a full-time running back. So even if you have Cam Newton, even if you have this defense, you need some ballers to score. The Falcons I'm worried about. I think, Matt Ryan will have a comeback season statistically. He'll get Julio Jones back. He'll get Roddy White back. But their defense was really, really bad.
Yeah.
And I'm just not sure how you fix it, especially against these other really good teams in the division.
And now losing, because Tony Gonzalez is officially going to retire. I believe he's done, right? He said this was his last year. He was coming back for this one, and that was it. So losing him as a weapon, that's a huge loss because, their 4 wins, you could look at him as pulling them into victory, but almost by himself, making some of the catches he made. And not having him anymore is going to be a huge loss for them.
I'm really looking forward to the Bucs to see what they do next season.
Yeah.
Really looking forward to it. There's so much upside with that team.
It'd be very interesting, especially in the draft if they end up with Clowney somehow, some way. It'd be very interesting.
They're another team though that I got to look at their offensive line and do something about it. I mean, Ryan was again running for his life. He had, I think, a career season in terms of pass attempts, but wasn't as productive as last season. And their running game with Steven Jackson he wasn't the same running back that we saw in 2012.
Well, he was hurt for a lot of the season.
Well, he was, but even when he wasn't, his scores basically were all within the red zone.
He's hurt every year.
He did running between the 20s.
He's injured every damn year. I mean,
but he's 30. He's 31 now.
Yeah. He's only played the equivalent of a 28-year-old though, because of all his injuries. That's the only upside is that he's missed a ton of games. So, but he, like you said, Jim, he's getting old. So then we move on to the NFC West, which was the best division in football. Overall, the division was 42-22. By far, the next best division was as I'm scrolling, was the
AFC West.
AFC West at 37 games. 37-27. So 42-22. The San Francisco was everyone's hot pick to win the division. I picked them, along with Steve, to win 11 games. Jim picked them to win 12. They indeed won 12. Seattle, Steve and Jim picked them to win 12 games. In the interest of time constraints, I closed out the audio file of the preview show, but I was on the record as saying that I was not buying into Seattle and that Russell Wilson was not going to follow up his rookie year. So I have the proverbial egg on my face. I am eating crow. I was wrong. The Rams, I picked them at 7-9. Jim picked 6. Steve picked 4. And the Cardinals, Steve and Jim picked them at 7, and I picked them to win 6. They indeed won 10. So the Cardinals, are a nice story. Where do they go from here is really, the question. Is Carson Palmer, how much does he have left in the tank? They got to figure it out. They seem to be on the right path, but they're running out of time because Larry Fitzgerald very quickly will get old, and you don't want to waste that window because he is a tremendous talent. The Seattle Seahawks. What more can you say? And we'll talk about them coming up when we preview the Super Bowl. Before we go, San Francisco, they seem to be missing the step early in the season offensively. Maybe that had something to do with Colin Kaepernick growing pains being the full-time starter. I'm not sure. They're still a phenomenal team, and they had they had a shot to win that game 2 weeks ago. I don't know. What do you guys think?
To me, I think this is going to be Seattle's division for a while. San Francisco's talented. They are. I've gone on record many times saying I'm not a believer in Kaepernick. I stick by that. I'm not going to say that he's going to be the second coming of Ryan Leaf, but I just think he doesn't have that factor that they need to put him over the top. Arizona, I agree with you, Keith. They're getting older. They had a great season. They definitely surpassed everyone's expectations, and they won some really good games. but they need to definitely bolster their roster at certain places. And then St. Louis, the big question is, how long are you going to stay with Sam Bradford?
I don't know. Are they in a position to get anybody better? They have more needs than quarterback in the draft. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, the Rams, I mean, they need an offensive lineman, a left tackle preferably. I mean, that's the way they should go, and then they should probably add somebody to their secondary, maybe a safety.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I mean, they're going to have a great defense. I like to see Sam Bradford actually bounce back, especially if they can get him some really good protection. That was a Rams team that was beat up. So, I mean, Bradford had some really good games, and then he had some really bad ones, and then he got hurt. So, this is one of those divisions. I think it'll be touch and go. The Rams are going to have to really do something to distinguish themselves. It'll be nice to see Zach Stacy in for an entire full season. I think they need a big-bodied receiver to couple with their. I mean, they have an array of slot receivers. They need a guy who's 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", to sort of be that red zone threat, the big Demaryius Thomas kind of a receiver. So we'll see. Cardinals, you guys are absolutely right. There's a window that's right here in front of them. I think they've sort of had to patch some things together this season, so it'll be interesting to see what they do in the offseason, especially with Rashard Mendenhall, a free agent. Be nice to see them have a number one running back that they could lean on all season long. You got Carson Palmer. They're going to need a young quarterback to replace him. This could be a season where they pick that guy up to sort of be under Palmer's tutelage, at least for half the season. And, one more wide receiver they could use.
Yeah.
One more guy. Michael Floyd should have another spectacular season coming up. Larry Fitzgerald could benefit if they could add one more player. 49ers, I love the 49ers. I think the one thing that's holding back Colin Kaepernick is Jim Harbaugh. And that's it. He, by all accounts, strong arm, very accurate, and what's holding him back is the offense that they're running there. If they would open it up, we would see a different 49ers team. And the Seahawks, they are the Seahawks. They're going to be contending for several years.
All right. So wrapping up this recap part of the program, Steve, you did finish in last place with 83 points.
Houston, Green Bay, they killed me with the injuries.
They just did. And unfortunately, I was not far behind with 80, and that's with my 5-point bonus for getting the Denver pick right for the AFC champion. Jim also picked Denver, so he gets the 5-point bonus for the AFC championship pick, and he finishes with a score of 67. I finished with 80, Steve 83. Jim owned this competition. Even if, because I did pick Denver to win the Super Bowl, even if Denver does win the Super Bowl, that'll only take 10 points off, so he will have a slimmer win. But still, Jim, we bow down to you.
Oh.
And now you just got to email me your address so I can get you the beer stein of knowledge.
That sounds awesome. And who did we all pick? I know, Steve. Who did I pick to play in the Super Bowl? Were you able to?
Denver and San Francisco.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah, and I had Denver and San Francisco as well, but I had Denver winning, and you picked San Francisco to win the Super Bowl.
I picked San Francisco?
Yep.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, your exact words were, I can think of a million reasons why Denver would win, but I think San Francisco will ultimately take the title.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So let's take a quick break and regroup, and then when we come back, folks, all of the Super Bowl analysis that you can stand from us three schmucks. I will break down the defensive, offensive line matchup. Steve's going to take the running backs versus the linebackers, and Jim will analyze the quarterback play, and then we will make our can't-miss Super Bowl picks. You're listening to 87 Live on 87 Sports Fans Radio.
break. Come on, come on, come on. So go.
Live Super Bowl preview is about to begin, folks. Reminder that this and every broadcast is brought to you by CG Imaging. That's cg-imaging.com. CG Imaging, virtually creating reality. And oh boy, as we get into this Super Bowl matchup, are we in for a doozy, folks? When you look at these two teams, you really have the clash of the Titans, the offenses versus the offensive juggernaut of the Denver Broncos versus the defensive steel wall of the Seattle Seahawks. I really hope that, and I guess the weather forecast as of right now is that precipitation is supposed to be at a minimal. I really hope that it stays true to that, because the last thing I want to see is Peyton Manning play in the snow in the Super Bowl. I'd rather see each team have a fair fight and just be able to play to their strengths and see who comes out on top. But with that, let's head over. I'll turn the spotlight on Mr. Saranteas and take us through the quarterbacks versus defensive backs matchups on both sides.
You know, the way I approach this, I mean, hands down, obviously, Peyton Manning is the more accomplished, more successful quarterback compared to Russell Wilson, even though Russell Wilson has had his moments where he has thrown for over 300 yards and tossed for multiple touchdowns. So he can play that game if he has to and if he's allowed to. But when it comes to the matchups, I mean, everybody knows that the Seahawks probably have the best set of corners and safeties in the league, and that has a lot to do with the height of these guys and the speed at which they play. Richard Sherman is a very stout 6'3". Cam Chancellor 6'3". Brian Maxwell 6'1", and then their free safety Earl Thomas is actually 5'10". And while that may not seem like a big deal to the people out there listening, most players at these positions are like 5'2", 5'11". And those few extra inches really do make a difference, because it tends to be that you're a better leaper at that height, as well as you have longer arms. So it makes it very difficult to get to the wide receivers, makes batting balls much easier. This corners, and I think combined, they have, oh boy, a whole lot of a whole lot of batted balls. I want to say between them all, they've got, 25, 30, which is pretty incredible. And as a group, I want to say they've got, 20-some receptions, which would put them at the top of the league. So this is a tough matchup for Peyton Manning. But the one thing that he's got in his favor, he's got wide receivers that match up very well to these players. Demaryius Thomas at 6'3", Eric Decker at 6'3", and if he can't get to them, he's got Julius Thomas at 6'5", and a speedy Wes Welker at 5'9". And on top of it, he's got a running back that Noshawn Moreno, who actually is a very, very good receiver, and 1/3 of his stats this year was because of his receptions, or close to 1/3. So I like the matchup. I think it'll be tough sledding when the game starts, but eventually, I think they're going to start feeling these corners out. One of these receivers will break out. I went back and I saw Andre Johnson, who's 6'3", had 110 yards receiving, 9 catches on I think 12 targets or something like that. I think that's what my numbers say. I don't know, but then T.Y. Hilton, 5'9", he had 140 yards receiving. So it's not impossible for these receivers to break out, and in fact, it's not impossible for a quarterback to break out. Our good friend Andrew Luck had a fantastic game against the same Seattle team earlier in the season. Let's see, what did he do? 229 yards and 2 TDs. By the way, except for one game this season, Peyton Manning has never passed for less than 2 TDs in a game.
That's just amazing,
isn't it? And on the road, the Broncos have never scored less than 28 points. So, I like the matchup for him. Now, when you flip it over to Russell Wilson, everybody talks about Marshawn Lynch, that he's the key to this game. I disagree. I'm not saying that Marshawn Lynch doesn't need to have a good game. I think he definitely needs to have a 100-yard game and a touchdown score. And if he can get to 2, there's a good chance the Seahawks would win. But Russell Wilson, he has to have a good game. He has to have 200, 250 yards passing, but more importantly, he needs 2 touchdowns minimum. And if he can get to 3, in fact, I'll predict it, whichever quarterback gets to 3 touchdowns, that team will likely win this game.
Oh, and there you have it. Now, don't tell us which one you think is going to do it, though.
I'll wait.
Not yet. Build up the suspense. Dun, dun, dun. Well, which leads us to the next stage of the game, I guess, in my mind anyway, would be the offensive line versus the defensive line matchup. Interesting take as I was researching this. That Pro Football Focus has the Seattle Seahawks ranked as the 26th rated offensive line, 25th in pass blocking, 17th in run blocking, and the worst as far as penalties go.
Well, they were the most penalized team in the league, weren't they?
Yeah,
I want to say they were.
It's their identity, really. They just play nasty. They're just pissy, for lack of a better term. On the other side, Denver was ranked the very best offensive line. So what does that mean? Well, we know what Seattle's going to do as far as what their identity is, and that is that they beat you bloody with Marshawn Lynch, and then Russell Wilson makes fantastic plays when he needs to. So what do they need to do? Well, if you are Denver's offensive line, you absolutely, positively have to slow down that pass rush. Seattle does a good job. They have very good defensive ends. Bruce Irvin can get to the quarterback as good as anybody in this league. You need to be able, which is a reward for Seattle, because Bruce Irvin, where they picked him, was a little bit of a reach, a little bit of a risky pick. Some off the field concerns either, but he has paid them back in buckets. But if you are Denver's offensive line, you need to find a way to slow that pass rush down. And this is also where Noshawn Moreno comes in, because if everyone's talking about the difference between him and Monty Ball this year, was that the fact that he can pass block, and he's pretty good at picking up assignments this year. So all that being said, they do have a little bit of an easier job because they have Peyton Manning behind them. And what does Peyton Manning do better than any other quarterback? He gets rid of the football. And your Seattle's defensive line, you have to be willing to get your arms up, try to bat balls as much as you can, because chances are, through no fault of your own, you're probably not going to get to Peyton Manning much. If they do, if Peyton Manning is sacked more than 2 times, I will guarantee that the Denver Broncos will not win this game. Because if he is on the ground more than twice, he's getting hit and chipped and in his face a lot more than that. And I don't personally think that's going to happen. I think Peyton's that good. But if he's down on the ground more than twice, I think that will speak more to the battle in the trenches going to Seattle, and that will dictate the game. The other side, if you're Seattle's offensive line, you have to be able to blow open holes for Marshawn Lynch. You have to eat chunks, because you cannot put this game, as good as Russell Wilson is, you cannot put this game on Russell Wilson's shoulders or his arm. You can't rely on him to carry your offense. He's not that type of quarterback. And Seattle, ranked for the season, as I lost my page now, they ranked 4th in rushing yards, 13th in rushing touchdowns, and rushing scoring. So at 4.3 yards per carry on the ground from middle of the road. You have to do a better job than that, and because you have to be able to control the clock. It is up to you, if you're Seattle's offensive line, to make sure that time of possession goes in your favor, because if you give Peyton Manning more time than he needs, it's going to be a very long day for you. So, to recap, Denver has to slow down that outstanding Seattle pass rush. And on the flip side, the Seattle offensive line, the keys to their success, you have to be able to run the ball in large chunks with Marshawn Lynch. Steve-O, what do you see with the running backs versus the linebackers?
All right, I'm going to break this down, and I'm going to talk about the linebackers first. You have two cores of linebackers who have been kind of overshadowed this year. Denver's, because of the loss of Von Miller, which was huge. But then also, they have had one of the best defensive lines in football as far as stopping the run. And on Seattle, of course, everyone knows they have one of the best secondaries, the best secondary, I should say, in football. I mean, their linebacker cores are not in any way, in my opinion, the best in the league, but they're very good. To me, they both have different goals in mind. For Denver, they need to be able to stop Russell Wilson, because I agree with Keith. The defensive line is going to be zoning in on stopping Marshawn Lynch. The wide receivers are going to be trying to open up lanes. And so, to me, one of the successes that Seattle's going to have is if Russell Wilson can scramble, get out of the pocket, get those 5-10 yards he needs to get a first down on different drives. So, to me, I think that linebacking core is going to be geared to stop him, because I said this to you on our break. As far as the running game, if Marshawn Lynch gets to that linebacking core and through the defensive line, usually if he gets to that point, you're not going to be able to stop him. So to me, Denver linebackers, they need to stop Russell Wilson, period. Now, as far as Seattle's, they are going to be the ones that are going to have to stop those little crossing patterns that Denver loves to play. They do the pick plays. They do Welker across the middle. They need to find a way to stop that, because their secondary is going to be able to do the bump and runs, going to be able to keep up with the wide receivers. It's those little crossing routes. Yes, the running backs of Denver are very good. Noshan Moreno has a little bit of a rib injury, but he's going to be fine. To me, they need to really focus on that, because if you look at a lot of the games when Denver has either needed to get going or had a little bit of a struggle in the beginning of the game, as soon as they get those pick plays working, as soon as they get those little 5-6 yard passes across the middle, that has opened up everything to them. So to me, the linebacking core in Seattle, they need to really focus on that. And then to disagree with Jim a little bit, to me, I look at when you play in this type of a situation where it's going to be, low 30s, there might not be any precipitation, but there's probably going to be a wind. They're calling for potential for not high winds, but enough wind to give a little bit of an interesting spin on the passing game. I think the running backs are going to be playing a huge part. Of course, Marshawn Lynch is going to be a big key. I agree, though, that Russell Wilson is going to have a big game, but Marshawn Lynch is the key. He needs to have a big game. And then same thing with Denver. No Sean Moreno, Monty Ball, Ronnie Hillman. A lot of times Manning has admitted that when the passing game has had a hard time going, that running game has almost been like a boxer where you jab, and then the passing game is like the right cross. If they're having a hard time getting started against the secondary, which they've not played a secondary like this. Their wide receivers are going to be able to get open, but it's that initial bump, that initial physicality at the line that they're not used to. Whereas, like you were saying, Keith, Manning can usually get the ball off pretty fast. They are going to be able to slow down that delivery a little bit by getting pressure on the receivers. So to me, the running game is going to play a huge part, maybe even more for Denver than it is for Seattle. So I'd be interested to see what's going to happen with that.
Well, let me just clear up one thing. I never said that Marshawn Lynch wouldn't have a big game, that it wouldn't be important. I mean, I think it's important, but I think there's been so much talk about him, people forget about Russell Wilson. Mm. In several of their wins on the road this year, he was the leading passer in the game. And he's a player that if he could score 3 touchdowns, 3 passing touchdowns, I don't care, make it 2 passing touchdowns and 1 rushing touchdown himself, there are some good things happening for that team. And that to me is an indication that the Seahawks, if he can get the 3 TDs, they're probably going to be the team that wins this game. Period.
That's true. If he can get off, that's the key.
Now the thing with Marshawn Lynch and why I hesitate in sort of saying, that he's the absolute be all end all of it. He hasn't been. I mean, if he gets you 100 yards and 1 TD, that's Marshawn Lynch's game.
Yeah.
I mean, for him to score 2 or 3 TDs, if that happens, then they should win.
Right.
Will they? I don't know, but they should. It just depends what's going on with Russell Wilson. That's why you can't put this all on Marshawn Lynch unless they are truly controlling the clock. And I think that this is the kind of game that sort of makes that a little more difficult. Now, something I forgot to comment on was the defensive backs for Denver. And this was something I found very interesting because I never view them this way. Everybody looks at the defensive backs for the Seahawks as the tallest in the league, which is part of the reason why there's such a good group of defensive backs. Champ Bailey's 6 foot tall. Rogers Cromartie, 6'2". Mm. Duke Hinacho, 6'1". Mike Adams, 5'11". So this is a unit that it very much, sort of mirrors what we see on Seattle's side. Yeah. And more importantly, when you compare them to the wide receivers for Seattle, hands down, these are cornerbacks that should be able to cover 5'10" Doug Baldwin, 5'10" Golden Tate. The only player I could see really giving them trouble is Zach Miller or Luke Wilson, depending if they work their tight ends into this offense, which I think they're going to have to do in this game. And then Percy Harvin, we just don't know what we're going to see from him. He's sort of the wild card in this group. But I absolutely love what Denver's defense has done, and I think it's their last 6 games. It's been absolutely impressive.
They're playing with a fire, when they've had to, because it hasn't always been there when you watch them.
And just to harken back to last year, Ravens versus 49ers, Giants versus Patriots, Packers versus Steelers, the defense that's playing exactly as you described it, Keith, is the team that will win.
Hard to fault that logic. And you bring up a good point, because when it comes up, when you're comparing the wide receiver group, it's bad enough that the Broncos have Peyton Manning, but he's also got much better quality receivers than what Seattle can throw out there. And Percy Harvin is a wild card, because if he goes in there and the wind blows the wrong way, he gets a snowflake in his eye, then he goes back on the injured reserve list. He's a porcelain doll is what he is.
You could say that, but really, those hits he took in that last playoff game would have put any receiver out of the game. So you can't say that he's a porcelain doll.
So
that was
the last 4 years.
Got blasted both times.
Last 5 years, I'm just waiting for the next migraine to come on. I'm just saying.
Make fun of his lifelong disability.
I'm making fun. I'm saying Percy Harvin is probably one of the more overrated NFL players that I can remember in recent time. He hasn't done a damn thing to contribute to anything. Maybe it's not his fault, but he hasn't done anything, and yet people fawn all over him like he's the second coming of Jerry Rice. Let's just be serious now, folks. Just saying. There, I got
all about potential.
But by the way, the weather, I actually like it for Denver. I think this is ideal weather conditions for them.
You think so?
Absolutely. It's a little bit warmer in Denver, but I mean the snow on the ground shouldn't bother them.
Yeah, but
the cold air shouldn't bother him.
But that offense is more, Peyton Manning obviously has the deep threat, but to get rid of that ball as quick as he needs to, they're going to need to be quick and be able to run short, precise routes. And if there's snow on the ground or it's a slippery track.
Oh yeah, but wait, the forecast that you described and that I've read as well is predicting a high on that day of 44 and a low of 27, 10% chance of rain.
Yeah, now
very slight wind.
Yeah, right now the precipitation seems to be good. It was more of a fear that I don't want the forecast to change more than anything else.
I mean, at this point, I just at the end of the day, everybody's got to play in the same weather conditions, and the players are going to adjust as they will. I just, everybody keeps talking about the weather, and unless it is a polar vortex or a torrential downpour or a blizzard. I just don't see how it's going to affect the game.
But see, the one thing that concerns me about them, though, is if you look at their two lowest scoring outputs this season have been the last two games in the postseason. And the fact that they were playing in as ideal a condition as you could have the last game they played at home against New England, against a team who had a pretty bad, beat-up secondary, and they only got in the end zone twice. That concerns me. Now, I know they probably didn't want to run up the score, but to only get in the end zone twice and have to kick 4 or 5 field goals, you can't do that against the Seattle team. And it just seems like even though he put up 400 yards, there just seemed like there were a couple issues that a lot of people are saying, well, Seattle's never seen an offense like Denver's. Well, Denver hasn't seen an offense or defense like Seattle's this year. And so it's for all of this Peyton Manning talk, which I think he's great, and I love the guy. This is a much different animal. He's not. If they can get the pressure on him, like Keith said, this can be a much different game than I think everyone is thinking it will be.
All right, prediction time, boys. Mr. Saranteas.
I'm going to call this a Broncos win, 31-27. And if you want to read my full analysis, come to thefantasygreek.com.
All right.
It'll be up tomorrow.
Steve-O.
I'm calling this a Seattle win, 24-14. I think their defense is going to be able to put pressure on Manning, and if that happens, it's game over.
I'm going to pick Seattle as well, and I'm going to pick 21-17 because I think that the 20-point mark is the magic mark for this defense. If you give Peyton Manning over the 20-point mark, they will not be able to keep up. So I'm saying 21-17, Seattle. So there you have it, folks. 2 against 1. We'll leave you with the championship chase from NFL Power and the Glory. You have been listening to the 87 Live NFL Recap and Super Bowl Preview. For Jim Saranteas from thefantasygreek.com and Steve Taylor, I am Keith Grieve. We'll see you all next week to find out just how smart we all are. Have a good night, folks.
Post-game show is brought to you by Christ, I can't find it. The hell with it.